That one worked.
Sorry about that. I've
No
been camped
worries.
in this call for 5 minutes, so
No worries. I don't know. It's a Zoomy thing.
none of them work. It doesn't
It's a
matter
Zoomy
which
thing.
one.
Doobie doobie doo. Where am I? Find large browser with information. There it is. Large browser with information.
Okay. I feel like this is enough people for quorum to start the meeting. Welcome to the Porter Weekly Dev Call. Today is Wednesday, March 24th, 2021. And let me paste the link to the notes here so everyone can join in and chat. First off, maybe people can introduce themselves because we're still kind of getting started now and not everyone knows each other. So I'm Carolyn Van Slyke. I'm one of the maintainers for Porter, and you will see me every week in this meeting. Vaughn, you want to go next?
Sure. Vaughn, another maintainer at Porter, should see me pretty much every week. Yeah. Let's see, Ralph, what's up?
I've got a hot mic. Outstanding. I'm Ralph Squillaci. I'm a program manager at Microsoft, and I am a Porter user and lover. And so I'll try to be here when I can because it's worth the whole effort. Let's see. We've got Joshua.
Okay. Hi everyone. The name's Joshua. I'm currently a software engineer from Indonesia in a company called Shipper. You folks maybe know me trying to tackle some, good first issues that Caroline kindly helped. So yeah, I want to get started to get contributing to Porter. So excited to know more about it.
We're real glad to have you here today. Thanks for coming.
Yep.
The pleasure's mine. Thank you.
So today, first of all, this is an open agenda. So if anyone would like to talk about something either today or in the future, this HackMD, anyone should be able to edit and add things to. I was hoping today to talk about making a V1 of Porter because our version number is getting a little silly at this point. I think I released version 0.36 yesterday.
Which is amazing.
It was a good version. It was a very good version. Nuno was super pumped about that.
I gotta go update.
You do. The reason why Nuno was excited about that feature, by the way, so Joshua did this, and it embeds the version of Porter that built the bundle inside the bundle's metadata. And when you run Porter explain, you can then see it and know like, okay, this was created with this version of Porter. Maybe you knew there was a bug, or you were hoping to be using a more recent version of Porter. People have been like embedding that type of information in the name of the bundle, or Nuno was actually making the version of the bundle match the version of Porter because he's really interested in like what works with which version. So this is going to save him a lot of time. So it was a big
That's
release.
Great. That's
big
great.
Release, and it got me thinking about V1. So if you've been paying attention to Slack and maybe following our proposals repository, there's been a lot of really big proposals out there that, to be honest, would take a very long time if we were like, let's hold off on 1.0 until we get it perfect. So instead, what we're thinking of is saying what we have right now, let's stabilize it, put in any key things that people are missing that would be a big breaking change, essentially, and then call it a 1.0 and start working on all of these big proposals that we have sitting out there. If you want to see proposals and watch them as they come, it's get porter /proposals. I'll put this in the notes. But it has all the different things that we're looking at the moment. So you see things around mix-in versioning, dependencies, and being able to organize data according to namespaces and labels, which is something Kubernetes does, and we're, to be honest, blatantly copying. So this is a good repo to follow if you kind of want to see what we're planning. Add that in here. Great. But they're huge. Like, for example, mix-ins as bundles would rework how we distribute mix-ins. So instead of just being a rando binary that you would install on your machine, we would start distributing the mix-in as a bundle, and it would be invoked and used by a bundle inside that bundle packaging format, which would be a very large change. So what I'm thinking is we'll try to use feature flags, and essentially we'd cut a version 1 of Porter, and bug fixes and stuff would go on it. But all this big proposal work that we're thinking of, we'd like to basically have like a flag in Porter that's like -- experimental or something like that, kind of similar to what the Docker experimental version lets you do. And then that would unlock a whole bunch of these large breaking changes that you could try out. But if you weren't interested in them, you could just stay on the normal V1 track and not be impacted by any large unexpected changes. Hey,
So I take it, oh, hey, Jennifer. So I take it that the expectation here, and I'm just trying to like make sure that I read this correctly and understand. So the expectation is that we can go ahead and keep rolling forward with feature work, but they would be hidden behind experimental feature flags.
Yeah.
So that we would actually just shipping the same binary.
Yeah.
And not worry, but having a clear delineation between usage.
Yeah, that's the plan. For a while I was thinking about, like, I've seen a Brigade do this where it's like, or Helm did this with V3, Brigade does this with V2, where they kind of went off, started a new, very long-term branch and did all the changes there. I think trying to maintain a long-term branch in addition to the main branch would spread us thin.
Yeah, I think it makes sense only with big, heavily adopted platforms, and we're only trying to get there, kind of thing. Yeah. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense. I think what you're proposing here is extremely agile and functional and keeps you to one binary. And
that's me. Extremely
like we don't have a huge ops team, so.
By huge ops team, do you mean me and Vaughn?
By huge ops team, I mean you and Vaughn.
Yeah.
Pretty much just Caroline.
Sometimes we're trying to rope another developer, Simon, into helping with that.
That's
He's
right.
working on our CDN today, actually, which is great.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah.
So
the thing is the way Porter is built. Porter is extremely like componentized. So like there's a component for interacting with mix-ins. There's a component for running a bundle and various things. So for us, we could literally just re-implement that component and then just have a feature flag switch which to instantiate, right? But it wouldn't include, you wouldn't have if statements everywhere,
So another thing you say up here is after Cub V1, people would only have a stable version of Porter 1x without worrying about breaking changes, only guaranteeing compatibility of V1x for the runtime Porter configuration. Could you explain what you mean when you say the underlying Porter library is not included and will change?
Yeah. So we write our code in Go, and Go has a concept of called exporting functions and classes and things like that. And Porter at the moment is written such that most everything is exported, as in someone could reference our Go library right now and start using it and automate Porter and have code that looked like, Porter.build bundle, and they could do that programmatically instead of through the command line tool.
Sure.
But to be honest, as we're making these larger changes, those things will change. It will look different in the code, even though the command line tool will look exactly the same.
Okay, so another way to say this is what we're saying is that if you use in Windows language, if you use porter.exe,
Yeah.
you're good to go.
Mm-hmm.
And if you link to the Porter Dynamic Link Library, the DLL, you may encounter breaking changes at that API level.
Yeah.
Okay.
Depending on what they're doing.
Yep.
Yeah.
That sounds great. I have no problem with that.
Yeah. Because I mean, we're just not ready to offer that.
No.
All.
And I think this is great. And allows you to keep rolling forward, allows you to keep moving. The API is going to change based on experimental flags as well. Things like that. And I'm expecting that, and we could be wrong. Maybe hopefully we'll find out that tons more people than expected are just using the library. But my expectation is it's going to be a reduced number relative to Porter.
I'm only aware of one who will be using it. So
so that's great. I think that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Love it.
Cool.
And by the way, for everybody, these are just my opinions. I have no monopoly on correct opinions. I only sound like I have opinions, which is different.
Yeah. Well, I like getting feedback from multiple people on this.
Sure.
Otherwise, I'm just talking to myself on a hack.
Right. No.
Probably not sound thinking.
Well, and I mean, I'm assuming everybody here is thinking about how they would use it, right? But I use this all the time, right? Every day I use this, and so it's like I'm trying to think like a user and like a company that uses it and operates against it.
Mm-hmm. So what would be in this 1.0? And this is where I really need feedback. I did a pass through of our V1 milestone that we'd had in our repository and kind of went through and said what really needs to be there and what was, to be honest, aspirational. Like, hey, as long as we're breaking stuff, let's break this too. Just always the way to go about it. So I went through this milestone here and kind of tried to pull out what's really important to us. And so I kind of extracted that here. So one, if we have Sev1 bugs, which is the emergency chocolate emoji.
I like it.
We have those. I think that's part of our stability. We need to fix those in a 1.0. I mean, obviously we'd love to fix those as soon as possible, but
sure.
How do we decide when we're ready to cut 1.0? That's kind of what I'm focusing on.
Right.
Vaughn and I have always kind of been keeping track of things in the porter.yaml that we'd like to remove in V1.0. For example, we used to have a field called tag, or we used to have a field called invocation image, and you would manually set these. And, the design has changed, and those are deprecated fields. We'd like to cut over and just get rid of them in 1.0 because we're carrying code to support multiple ways to configure things. Sure. So those would go. This was a big one. Right now, if you install Porter using our install script, you get everything installed. But it's not everything, which is what makes it confusing. Right now, it's plugins and mix-ins that we feel are stable enough to give people by default. And that was always just something we did at the very beginning when we were proof of concept so that we could get things on people's computers and they could use it quickly. At this point, we have commands to install mix-ins, and not everyone is interested in every mix-in. Like if I'm using just Google or just AWS or just Azure, I don't want the other mix-ins for other cloud providers on there as well because it's slow. The other problem that this causes us is that if I want to upgrade Porter to a new version, the install script upgrades everything, all your mix-ins on your machine. And as we know, when you're writing a bundle, usually you're targeting a particular version of the mix-in. And so when you upgrade Porter, if it messes up what version of your mix-in is installed, it's really not helpful. So we'd like to fix that and only install Porter and the exec mix-in together.
Right.
Because the exec mix-in is actually pretty heavily tied to Porter. Like, I don't know. I could go either way on if we should ship them together or even have exec separate. But that's what we'd like to tackle.
Exec would be
big change
required
for
for the
people.
hello world, right? You know when you do porter create and you go to build, if you didn't have exec, it'd blow.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's the minimum set of things necessary to use porter in some way.
think so
But on the
too.
other hand, if I'm in a production environment, I don't need any mixins installed. I just need porter installed. So if you want to be really lean and keep unnecessary things out, installing porter in a production environment where you're only running bundles, you'd probably also want to not even have exec installed.
Yeah, except for in that case, if you're installing that, you're basically deliberately installing porter in production.
Yeah.
Would mean that you should know enough to go ahead and torch exec if you wish to torch exec.
Yeah, at
Right,
least
I mean,
we're not bringing 6
yeah.
mix-ins along for the ride at that point.
Yeah, it very minimal. I just feel like exec is required for the basic one, right?
Mhm.
And then if you know, I mean, like it's so much better than having 9 that it's like worth doing. And then in production case where you're really using it as a runtime, you could just document here's where to torch the mix in if you'd like to torch it.
Yeah. The other
I think
thing is
that's
that
fine.
will mean that if you're in an authoring environment, right? I'm on my local dev machine and I'm writing bundles that target v0.36 of the exec mixin. That means that if I upgrade porter, I've now changed the version of the exec mixin on the computer, and I would probably then have to, if I really care about what version I'm on, reinstall the exec mixin at the version I was interested in.
Yep, that's true.
So it's kind of, yeah. But anyways, we don't need to hack that.
But
out
you're
here.
going to have to actually, in the end, you're going to have a mix-in version install, right? You know, command and little bit of documentation anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So even if you're not stomping on anybody, you got to give people control over it. So, and tell them they need to think about controlling it, right? So I don't know what other people think. I think exec is absolutely right.
I would second that. It feels kind of like in an operating system environment, you get your shell scripting experience, no matter what, like at that base level. And so not eliminating that, but all of the other pieces, like you have to choose. So it's that it totally makes sense to me. And also just calling out explicitly that if you upgrade porter, just like you could get an updated mixin as well, which is kind of, that would be the expected experience, I would think, because just like if you do a new version of an operating system, you're getting a new shell.
Yeah.
So
I think maybe the big trick is we just need to make sure that this is communicated well up front, because it will change how people automate and install porter and CI/CD and things like that. And then make it really clear what the installer is going to be responsible for going forward and what they're going to need to do, and just make sure we don't mess up that contract.
Yep.
Quick question.
Yeah.
I might have missed this discussion, but 1408 mentions, at the time when it was written up, it mentions a dependency on 975 or something to auto install mixins that are defined in a bundle that you run. And I'm wondering if we, no, 1 second.
Which one's, this one was 1408. I just want to make sure I'm looking at, do you mean 190?
Oh, I sure do. Yeah, thank you. 1192. And then linked near the bottom is like, or maybe in the issue original post, 975.
Yeah, 975.
Oh, you know what? To be honest, I need to edit that. I was confused. I think we really do want 975, because then it reduces the burden on the author, but it doesn't prevent us from doing this change independently.
Agreed.
You know? It's an extra step they would have to do if they're building a bundle and it's using a mixin that isn't already installed, they're going to need to manually install it. We'd like to be able to automatically detect what mixins are used in a bundle and then magically install it for you. And at this point, we've decided that that's going to happen in mixins as bundles. Probably, and not, it's a big feature pretty much.
Not only that, it's not necessary for finding stability here. In other words,
Agreed. Yeah.
That's the break, the low bar here is that is a beautiful feature and will be greatly appreciated, but not having the mix-in that you're looking for results in an error that allows you to add the mix-in you're looking for. So
Yeah.
we're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It would, if we don't have that 975 or the auto install, it would kind of present hurdles for people using Porter and CI and running bundles, right? Like,
I think it actually improves the situation for people who are using Porter and CI. Right now, we've kind of encouraged people to not pay attention to what version of mixins are installed, because Porter just brings a bunch of whatever the latest version is of every single mixin, right?
Sure.
Especially in CI though, where we're automating, you should care what version of a mixin you're using, because there's different functionality supported in different versions, different bugs, whatever. I mean, the schema in the porter.yaml could be different. So I feel like we've encouraged people to do something that is not what you should be doing in production. By taking this away and making it an explicit thing, their CI script will look like run the Porter install and run it for a specific version of Porter, right?
Right.
And then any mixins that they know that they use, they would have Porter mixin install, Kubernetes, and say the specific version they want.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the install script, when it just kind of put everything on there, we were giving them anything, whatever the latest version was. But we're definitely going to need a lot of guidance for users about this change, because it'll be a big change. The next thing is a stability issue, and it's actually a data corruption issue. So this really needs to be fixed. If I have a Porter on my machine, okay, and I run an installer for Kubeflow, right? And I give it the default name because I'm super lazy, and it's called Kubeflow for the installation. And then somebody else comes along, and maybe they're sharing the same data, they log into the machine too, and they also install Kubeflow. It essentially overwrites and supersedes that previous installation. And this is something Jennifer pointed out a while back, that Porter instead should go, whoa, this is already installed with this name and I won't overwrite it. So it'll force you to pick a unique installation name. It's just kind of like an accidental bear trap that's there. It was kind of a feature in development because it made things easier because you didn't have to pick unique names, but in production, it's a really bad thing if someone accidentally did this.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct.
One of the next things is when Porter runs a build, we generate a bunch of files. Every single file except one, we generate into a hidden folder called .cnab, which I misspelled in the notes.
We still like you.
Yeah, it's .cnab in your current directory. And that's where we put things like, where does the bundle.json go that actually represents the bundle? Where do we copy in mixins that are used by the bundle? Things like that. The one thing we don't put inside of .cnab is the Docker file.
Right.
And people have reported that I'm using Porter and I'm using my own Docker file. I'm doing my own stuff unrelated to Porter.
Right.
And this is another data corruption kind of problem, but not at the same level. We'll overwrite a Docker file if it's there.
Yeah,
and that may not have been our Docker file.
Right.
Porter's. So this just moves it into the .cnab directory.
That makes complete sense to me. I see no reason not to do that.
As always, the reasons are just time and people to do the changes.
Well, I have to say, it does seem like a user corruption problem,
Yeah.
right? And it's an annoying one because it's hard to, there's no warning,
No.
right?
there
And
isn't.
so the V1 break line would be something like, well, you're going to have to go in and put coded warnings for that, you know, like figure out some algorithm to detect it, when in fact, if we just move it and place it in a different location, we're mostly good,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and we do
So-
already document up front. If you touch anything in .cnab,
I know,
you will
but-
lose it.
But I'm the classic user who like
Uh-oh.
saw how it worked. So I never read the documentation about exactly what happens with the regenerate. Like that's just not the where you apply your brain when you're learning the system, because there are people who read the documentation first and then try it out with a tool, and there are people who try it out with a tool, and then when something goes wrong, they start reading the documentation.
Yeah.
And it'd be nice to handle both in V1. And in this case, unless there's an objection, I would think this would be a relatively straightforward change.
I mean, I think it is. Vaughn knows more than anybody, probably. He's very recently been working on this
She's really talking you up, Vaughn.
code.
Is that like a voluntold? Yeah, it should be pretty simple.
Yeah.
We shall
See, if that's the case, I think this is a logical 1.0 feature, because you know you're going to have to do something to meet the 1.0 bar for it, and this is actually probably the lowest and best solution, lowest cost and best solution.
Yeah. So since we agree on that, I'm going to move on to the next one.
Jennifer and Joshua, you jump in
Yeah.
if you have opinions about any of this, because it's just a conversation.
Yeah. So what I'm wondering, now that you've invited me, no, I'm kidding.
Of course.
How are we decide? Like, is there a decision process here? Are we basically saying, yes, that looks good? Like, how do people signal, yes, this sounds good? Because things sound good. And do we have is this in priority order?
It is not. I just kind of did a first pass through to say the bar is stability and breaking changes that we really need to make all in one go, right? Because we're doing a big major version bump. And once we're asking people to make changes, we'd like to do it once and not a week later and then a week later and a week later and have it trickle in. So I went through and found things that were stability issues, data integrity issues, and breaking changes.
And as far as I know, I think we're just going through them for the first time right now.
Yeah.
So it's really much more of a conversation about how you feel, how it strikes you, what do you know about usage, like, you know, the whole thing. So I think the first pass is just to kind of like, well, what do we think kind of deal. And then probably we might prioritize it or do something more specific afterwards. What do you think, Carolyn?
I wanted to make sure, one, that I wasn't getting greedy and putting things in V1 that we probably didn't need to. So I was looking for that gut check. But then also,
exactly.
I may not have found everything. You may have a pet bug or issue or something that you're aware of, or I didn't catch that something would be a breaking change.
Okay, so we'll be doing another more formal
probably
thumbs up, thumbs down on the list then.
Yeah.
Cool. I wasn't sure what, so far, this is informative. Everything sounds great. And I will speak up if I feels.
Okay. I guess the other thing we're keeping an eye out for is something that would be really difficult for someone to migrate, you know, just so we can prepare people and warn them well in advance that we're thinking of doing something that's going to break their world. So speaking of breaking people's world.
Mm-hmm. I noticed the next one.
Yeah. So this is talking about file format changes. So this could include changes to porter.yaml, or it could be maybe to the config.toml, which is Porter's configuration file for wherever you installed Porter. One that immediately jumped out at me, we don't even have an issue for it, but we really need to do this, is in the porter.yaml, I'd like to call out what version of Porter it was meant to be used with.
Yeah, that would be useful.
So if something was made for the experimental version of Porter that we're proposing, they weren't trying to run it without experimental turned on, or other things like that. Just make sure we're actually matching this up properly, because otherwise you could end up with the user thinking something was going to happen when the bundle was built, and it may silently not happen if the versions are different.
In this case, you need to export the information so that at least systems and users can make decisions regardless of.
Yeah, so this would end up, it'd be in the porter.yaml, so you could just see it and Porter can enforce it. But I think even then, when we build the bundle, we'll probably bring that information along as metadata about the bundle in general, so it can kind of communicate what version of Porter it was intended for.
Okay.
Yeah.
All of these are good bullets. Since the objective of a V1 is to find stability for people to grind over, and actually use for the course of a year or more, or whatever, and not bonk into anything they didn't expect, such as these issues. All of these bullets seem like the right thing to do. Now, the only question here would be the question of, exactly what is the hit relative to some of these other things. So when you ask to have us sort of flag things we should not worry about doing, right? Push back. Probably one thing we need to do is go through all of these before we sit there and go, wait a minute, that is on the bottom of the priority list and maybe doesn't make the grade, rather than, so we can keep on going through.
Yeah.
But unless anybody disagrees, I think that bullet is definitely a 1.0 bullet.
Yeah, I think we're going to cause ourselves, we've run into this with other things too, where we've started saying what version of a schema it is essentially. And we've always regretted it. We didn't have it from the beginning in the CNAB spec and things like that. So just lessons learned that we're now. Yeah.
Templating syntax changes.
Okay, so this one is a bug that someone reported internally in Azure using Porter with ARM. When you do things like this, a templated value where you say, I want to insert as a variable, essentially, a value from a parameter, right? This parameter may have originally been an integer. It may have been a Boolean, right?
Right.
But because of how our templating syntax currently works, we force you to put it in double quotes and it becomes a string in the YAML. Right. It looks like this. You always have to quote these double curly brackets that we use for templating. Yeah. And this prevents us from representing integers. And it's preventing some people from working with other tools that expect an integer for port or for number of VMs and things like that. And when we give these tools like ARM or Terraform a string, they're not happy, and it just doesn't work. So this is a limitation in Porter right now that most people don't realize is there. And I need to write up the proposal, but I have a proposal to address this with pretty low impact to people's existing templating. It is a change that they have to make, but there's like kind of fallback defaulting. So I can get into that some other time, but I think this needs to go into 1.0 because it's just a sneaky darn bug. Yeah.
I want to say that note, since we plan to use handlebars under the hood, there is nothing stopping someone from quoting properly and using handlebars up the wazoo. Makes me think of my mother, and I thank you for that.
Isn't that what all the kids
that is a good central United States upper Midwest phrase, if ever there was one. Handlebars up the wazoo. Yeah. Mom's Wisconsin, so.
Got another one here. Sometimes your bundle, let's imagine it's a Helm bundle, okay? It's doing something with a Helm chart. And that Helm chart is referencing another image, right? Maybe it's like the official Redis image, for example, and it's deploying Redis for you. We have a syntax right now. Let me just type this out. It looks like this. And you say things like, okay, I rely on the Redis image, and this is the reference. It's actually just Redis latest. Sure, right? But there's another field that we have called tag. usually this is actually like a giant SHA. Let's say digest, ABC 1, 2, 3. Right, it's a big ugly digest. And then we have this other field called tag that could be v4.2. whatever, right? Everyone wants to use this field. No one, including myself, understands how this field is actually working with Porter all the way through CNAV to OCI. Like what happens when you move a bundle all the way through into production, this tag gets completely lost, but everyone expects this to work. And we either need to remove it or change how it works, or probably change how it works and then document it. Because this is one of the more common things I get pinged about in Slack is I specified this tag and it didn't do what I thought it would. This may actually be a spec change, to be honest. We keep talking about CNAV to OCI. The fact that it doesn't preserve tags, like if it pushes an image, CNAV to OCI, when it pushes an image, even though it was tagged in the source as v4.3.1, the only thing that gets pushed to the destination is the digest. And that confuses everyone, to be honest.
Sure.
So as part of fixing
I can
this,
see that.
it would be nice to get a solid answer about, can we just, even if it's just for Porter, can Porter have an option to push the tags too?
Yeah, and
I know you're not supposed to use tags.
So is that part of one of these bullets that I'm looking at that are surrounding 316 or?
This one?
Or is that in the usability issue?
It's actually a separate issue in CNAV to OCI that I need to link to.
Okay, no sweat. So that's a CNAV to OCI issue.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It's a CNAV to OCI issue, and then, Porter tried to make things better, but we didn't go all the way. So
right.
we need to
actually
just fix it or remove it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so not to derail, because that one's interesting to me. I like the idea of fixing things so that they work properly.
Yep.
Like psychologically, that makes me happy. This one probably, I would say, although I understand the problem.
Yep.
My first instinct is to say I'm not clear this is a 1.0 problem, or whether it's one that we fix in 1 point plus, something like that. But that's my take, and it's unconsidered. That is, I haven't deeply worked through it. I don't
only reason it's tagged for 1.0 is because it changes the schema of Porter.yaml if we
exactly
this feature.
Exactly. Okay. So that one might be a TBD that we need to sort of chew over really quickly and make a decision about. Jennifer and Joshua, if you have thoughts on that one, do let us know.
We could, go ahead, Jennifer, sorry.
I think it's one of the ones, I think it's one where we should think about it and discuss more asynchronously and not immediately. I like minimizing how much we change.
Sure.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we could, if we know it's broken or it's not working how we intended it to, in V1, we could update the schema to remove support for tag. And then when we get to fixing end-to-end via CNAV to OCI, it would be additive.
Yeah, that's one option. I like that. That's a good way to be able to deal with it too. This would be actually, it's not a break and change at all. So I just want to skip it. I think I put it in there because it's just my pet thing. But we don't need to talk about that one. It doesn't need to be there. The other change is we'd like to
actually talk about it, because I feel like,
oh sure,
I feel like this is your baby. We can talk about these things.
Okay. So what this is about is when you're writing your porter.yaml and you have a step, and the step is a Kubernetes step or a Helm step or whatever. Every step in the Porter and YAML needs a description right now. It's required. And to be honest, it's just used so we can print something while it's running. It's actually not critical at all to any part of it. And so it's annoying. And I've noticed a lot of times people are just like putting like, blah, blah. I'm filling in something important here. You know, like they're just putting in dummy text. And it also changes if you want to have a really short mix-in, like Azure login. It's kind of silly to have to put a description on that because you can change how it reads and make it flow better if you don't have the description there. So it was more just like a UX thing for me, and it was kind of like it's just a little paper cut every time Porter's forcing you to fill in something that isn't used or necessary at all. So I wanted to just mark description as optional.
Is it a hard thing to change? Because I feel like that is a really useful change, especially if it's forcing people to add outputs and that isn't valuable. That actually seems reasonable to me as to do if it's not.
It's a really small change.
Yeah, I would say yes, but
okay.
Like we're not voting right now. But I think that sounds like a great UX change. I do feel like things that are like paper cuts do matter.
Okay.
They do. There's no question.
So the last one that's a breaking change is right now we publish our images to Docker Hub, and Docker Hub has changed how they support people who aren't paying them, essentially the free plan. And we've encountered this a couple times before. If there isn't enough activity on some of the things that we're pushing to Docker Hub, they're getting pulled.
Right.
They stop existing on Docker Hub. So I think just last week, I made a change so that we dual publish. Everything we're publishing is going to GitHub Container Registry and a Docker Hub.
Yeah.
And eventually I'd like to just switch off and stop doing that and just support GitHub Container Registry. It's just that some people may have scripted. You never know what people have done, right? They may be relying on the fact that it's there. So in that way, it's a breaking change, but
it is. You're protecting other humans.
Yeah.
Who have written pipelines, and you're telling them that on 1.0 they can now have confidence that it's in GHCR, and they won't get blocked by anonymous poll changes or anything like that.
Yeah, that's the
yeah, and GitHub basically gets funded to push packages for the world, which is a good general statement. So we're not worried about that service going the way of Docker anytime soon.
Hopefully not.
So that makes sense. I think probably down the line, one of the things we'll want to do is, this isn't a now thing, but I'm just thinking about like how.
Is it just me who can't hear Ralph anymore?
No, I can't hear Ralph either. I was like, is this just me?
I was just about to take down his words of wisdom and then his audio cut out.
Yeah, I was like, we may need to think, and then like completely gone.
Ralph, come back to us. We can't hear you.
So with Ralph figuring out his configuration, does it cost for on GitHub for the artifact repository here? Does it cost money? Is this something that, like, how is this? Sure. I mean, it costs money to somebody, but like, will it be something that end up like potentially causing problems?
The fact that we're using GitHub, because it's free. I think
the GHCR.io.
Yeah.
Will it always be free, or is it like a?
Can you hear me?
We can. Ralph, do you want to answer this question about?
Yeah. So if I heard you right, Jennifer, you're talking about cost and so forth.
Yeah, I was trying to make sure that there's no like. It's like if I look at I see private repositories. Are public repositories always free?
So at the current time, generally speaking, the problem with Docker Hub is of course that they ran out of money for all the outbound costs, right? And because once you become the repository for the world, you're going to pay for a lot of outbound cost, especially with the rise of automation, right? Basically, it's our fault that they collapsed, right? And so one of the things they did is they decided to turn on authentication. And so they decided it would be okay to pay for your outbound as long as you authenticated, and they had, they had your identity so that they could track you and sign some sense of telemetry. They they figured that was a fair exchange. Problem is that all the automation tools can't do that easily or as easily. So what I was trying to say was that the thing about this is that basically GitHub is funded to dump these packages on the world for the foreseeable future. Like its mandate is literally to serve these packages to everybody. And at least for the foreseeable future, it has crap tons of money. So it's unlikely that we will, like if we have to think about open source and sharing, somebody pays for the download costs because all of the cloud, there is no business model that any of the public clouds use that doesn't charge for outbound, right? And so as we roll forward and when you get more successful, you're going to be built into more automation. As that happens, you can see the cost ratchet up. And, for example, Google must know tons about the outbound costs of Kubernetes participation in CNCF. We know tons about, for example, the Helm community is massive, and we know, we have to support that, so we know what those costs are. So just in general, that's sort of how you think about it. It's possible looking forward that you can imagine that GitHub might have that issue. Another, a Google property that would have that would be, YouTube is sort of the same thing. Costs a lot of money, not only in storage, but also in outbound networking to do that kind of stuff. In this case, I cannot foresee that GitHub would have any problem supporting anonymous polls and therefore automated polls for everything for at least 5 years. I cannot imagine there coming a problem. So that's sort of why, and then its mandate being for the world, right? Like that's what they're funded for. So this seems like the logical thing. What do you think, Jennifer? I mean, that's sort of like the whole kind of the big picture thing.
Yeah, no, it looks great. That's what I was actually wanting to check on because I wanted to make sure there was a funding model and not that that the thing that happened with Docker isn't going to happen here. And it looks like, and also the fact that it's free for public repositories, that's great.
Right.
And you had started to say one thing we need to look at, and then your microphone cut out. And I was kind of wondering what that one thing was.
No, actually, it was the discussion I just had. One thing we need to look at is the big picture of how all this, where the actual cost locusts are. It turns out that the big public clouds have so much money that in theory, we think that, a lot of the services that they provide us as developers are always going to be free. In reality, they can change their terms of service at any time. And it's not just a Microsoft thing or a GitHub thing or a Google thing. I mean, it's all the businesses are just, they have feature sets that they can change anytime. And Docker Hub is actually a good example. They just did change the feature set. And it surprised a lot of people. So as long as we know that, we don't see any reason this would be a problem for 5 years, then we're probably making a pretty good decision. And any different decision would have to have a plausibly longer than 5-year period. The question you might ask, which is a good one, which is, okay, let's imagine the community explodes next year. And all of a sudden we get, tens of millions of downloads every single month, because of automation. Again, our fault. If that happens, then certainly Microsoft would be at very least one of the people that walked up to begin to fund the infrastructure support for that. But at this point, I don't see that as even being in the remote realm of possibility, given how well funded GitHub is for the entire world, right? Like their mandate literally is to serve bits for every developer on the planet and every operator on the planet. So right now, I think we're pretty good.
Just a quick time check. We have 5 more minutes left, 6
Yep.
more minutes left.
Let's go.
Yeah. I want to skip to what's not in V1, just to make sure we're all agreed.
Okay.
The code is going to change. Anyone who's actually building against our code, other mixins, other plugins, people who are automating Porter, what could get impacted, right? So I just want to make sure we're clear on that. We're good with that. I think I called it out at the top too, but I just really want to make sure.
Can you
people
say
don't
that
think-
in a different way? Because I'm
Sure.
not parsing it quite.
Let me go up to where we were talking about our
Is this
compatibility guarantee.
We are not guaranteeing that V1 will not have. It's not like Go, and it's there could totally be changes that impact people. We're not promising with V1 that we're not that we might not change the API.
Correct. So the things that we'd like to be able to keep stable in a V1 would be how the command line tool works. Like what are the flags, behaviors, things like that. The Porter configuration, which is our config.toml file and our porter.yaml, right? But if someone is actually compiling Go code against ours, it will change.
This is the equivalent of the
that.
earlier statement on the library.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to drive that home, make sure we know that that's
yeah.
how
I
it's
think
scoped.
I think Jennifer's point mainly is like, let's state that more directly here.
Yeah.
Because you've got it, but you mention it in a slightly different way than you do above. Let's just say the library API will change.
Okay.
Right.
So I had some usability issues that they're not breaking changes, but again, we were talking about paper cuts.
Right.
I think I'm going to go through these a little bit faster. One is when you're doing Porter build and you want to specify the version, people use a prefix, a V prefix. They don't say 1.0.0, they say V 1.0.0. And we've had a bug about this for a while, and we'd like to just be a little looser and go, sure, you can give us a V or not a V. We don't care. Right now it's an error and it's confusing.
Seems good. It seems good. That's pending resources and time.
Yeah. It's a small change. It's a very small change. So that's why I'm a little more confident about that one. We have performance problems that are impacting our ability as developers to work on Porter.
Right.
It makes it very slow for me. I'm losing minutes every single time I'm building bundles. It's slowing down our CI, etc. This is why I care about this. I have a branch that switches us to use BuildKit. And it has significant speed improvements. So if I make a small change to a porter.yaml and then I rebuild, it takes seconds, not another 2 minutes. So this is something I'd like to see go in. Longer term in the experimental branch, performance will be much improved, right? But in the meantime, as we're working on this, I would like to get some of my own dev time back. So I'm advocating for this one to go in to use BuildKit. It's actually already implemented. We just haven't said like, yes, let's switch, I guess.
When you say switch to default or have it configurable?
I would rather not have it configurable and we just use BuildKit, because it's not like we require them to have a what's it called, like a certain Docker CLI or anything. It's really just a library change for us, like what we use to build the image. I think it may introduce I'm not even sure if it introduces a minimum daemon version for Docker. We'd have to look at that. But it's also heavily requested from external users too. But I don't really want to make it configurable because I don't see the advantage of doing legacy Docker builds.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, and just tying down or like looking into what you just mentioned, the minimum dating version, just making sure like there's no like
Yeah.
big hurdles for users. But yeah, that's it.
What's the status of build kit? Because I didn't think it was. I don't know what the right terminology to use is. But you have to stay. Stable's the wrong. It's certainly not turned on by default in Docker. You have to turn it on, right? It's still an option under experimental or beta or something.
It depends what features you're using, what you need to put in the Docker file. They have more than one schema thing that you can put at the top.
Right.
I'm just looking at the one that just gives us better layer caching, which is, I don't know. We can look that up later,
I understand the reasons for doing it. I'm trying to remember. I turned it off for some reason. For something I was doing not that long ago because I was all sorts of problems with it.
Okay, if you can find that, that'd be super helpful.
I had it turned on by default, and I turned it off because it was. But I can't remember the details off the top of my head.
Okay, I can't do much with that though. Like if you know what it is
No.
that we're worried about. I feel like it's been around long enough that even if it's still called experimental, I feel pretty comfortable doing it without using extended features.
Here's the way I look at it. If it's still experimental, right? Just pop it into an experimental flag feature and after post V1.
It's just that
They're just
not
a
happy
suggestion
about that.
Well, I mean, I think that the operative question here is I am not opposed in any way to having a V1 which is aimed at stability and longevity.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed in any way for having it use any non-V major V feature from some other project, right? Like that doesn't bother me in the least. It's really about the criticality of that feature. And as you migrate that feature up, may encounter bugs or pain problems, or it might change or whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden your V1 doesn't work for some reason.
Yeah.
So that's the only issue to negotiate. And an easy way around that is to say that the V1 has this feature, but you could also probably use experimental to, to add in an upgrade to a new fixed version.
Yeah, if we're concerned about it, I would prefer not to put it under experimental because that at the moment we're thinking about gating a lot of really big breaking changes, like known breaking changes on that flag.
Right.
So I don't know, Vaughn suggested making it configurable. It doubles the amount of code we're having to maintain in this area.
Yeah, sure.
And also changes the libraries that we compile against. So it's going to make things a little bigger and more complicated, but it could be configurable if we really have doubts about the stability of build kit.
Can we put something here instead of saying adding build kit support, saying reduce time for builds or something, and then like sub bullet like build kit? I would like to look at your the branch that you have this improvement on. I feel there might be another option here, but I'm not exactly sure. So,
Sure.
But I think the main thing is like reducing the build time, and then how we get that. Awesome.
I'll link to the branch here and give that out to people. Oh, I got it. So we're out of time.
Yep.
But you can keep chatting about this next time too.
And also in the Slack.
Yes.
This is an amazing list, and I think it's really, really helpful because we'll be able to go through it again and sort of figure out those last niggling conversations, make choices, and then drive. Yay.
Yeah.
Just-
Hey, Simon, can you help me figure out this answer right here? If BuildKit is unstable,
Yeah,
or
so
what
I
we're
was just
dealing with?
I was just doing a quick search, and
Yeah.
there's an open issue on Moby saying make BuildKit the default. That has a bunch of commentary on it. It was probably just worth reading that, because there's a
Okay.
bunch. I haven't read
Can
it.
you add a link to that in here?
Yeah, I will
the
do.
notes?
And
Okay.
and the second thing I just quickly picked up was BuildKit. I didn't know this. BuildKit does not allow you to build Windows containers. Now, we might not care about that, but
No, we don't.
it's a hard limit that if you use BuildKit, you can't build Windows images.
Yeah. We kind of just don't have that on our timeline at all anywhere, having Windows invocation images. So I wouldn't be
But
concerned about that.
if you install Porter on Windows and ran it with Docker for Windows, wouldn't it build configured for Windows? Wouldn't it build a Windows image?
No, we're talking about the underlying invocation image. The from statement couldn't be from a Windows operating system.
Right.
And all of Porter is based off of Linux AMD 64, but keep digging into that. It's gonna suck if we have to do both, but maybe we can get creative about it.
I'll stick a link. I haven't got this thing open in editor. I'll stick a link in it to that other thing anyway.
Like, you can use BuildKit on Windows. It's just a matter.
Yeah,
of
you
which
can't build
target
Windows
OS.
images with BuildKit.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Don't know why I didn't look into the detail.
I think they're taking advantage of a bunch of stuff in the Linux kernel.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
I'll make sure to link this out again in the Porter channel. Make sure everyone can edit this and work on it. Please add more stuff to this or comment it up.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
See you later. Bye.